No one could wake this alien princess for over 300 years until a human touched her. The metallic corridors of the Celestial Embassy hummed with an otherworldly energy as Ambassador Arthur Sterling strode purposefully through them, his protective gray suit reflecting the soft blue lighting. His tousled brown hair and neatly trimmed beard gave him a rugged yet diplomatic appearance, while his piercing blue eyes scanned his surroundings with keen interest. "Ambassador Sterling," a melodious voice called out, "we're honored by your presence." Arthur turned to face Counselor Thashlus, a tall, ethereal being with silvery skin and elongated features. The alien's ceremonial robes shimmered with each movement, creating an almost hypnotic effect. "The honor is mine, Counselor," Arthur replied, his deep voice carrying naturally through the chamber. "I must admit, I'm intrigued by your invitation to visit the Preservation Wing. It's not a typical stop on diplomatic tours." Thalus's expression became somber. "What we're about to show you is, unique. Something that has puzzled our finest minds for centuries." They proceeded through several security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last. Finally, they entered a vast circular chamber, bathed in soft amber light. At its center stood a crystalline capsule, its surface adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Holy shit," Arthur breathed, momentarily forgetting diplomatic protocol. Inside the capsule lay what appeared to be a sleeping woman, except she wasn't human. Her skin was a light blue shade, and her long, straight, silver blue hair floated around her as if suspended in liquid. She wore a form-fitting orange outfit that seemed to be made of some kind of advanced material. "This is Princess Astria," Thalus explained. "She's been in this state for over 3 centuries. Arthur approached the capsule, fascinated. "But she looks peaceful, like she's just taking a nap." "Our species can live for millennia, Ambassador. But this isn't natural sleep. We've tried everything to wake her, our most advanced medical procedures, our strongest stimulants, even ancient mystical practices. Nothing has worked." "What happened to her?" Thalus's expression darkened. "Politics, betrayal. She was the rightful heir to our world's throne. Someone wanted to make sure she never claimed it." Arthur studied the sleeping princess's face. Despite her alien features, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her. But she didn't die. Numbered, the poison used was unusual. Instead of killing her, it induced this state. Our scientists believe it was designed specifically for her unique physiology. As they discussed the princess's condition, a junior diplomat rushed in, looking flustered. "Counselor, there's an urgent matter requiring your attention in the main chamber." Thalus looked torn. "Ambassador, would you mind waiting here? This shouldn't take long." "Of course," Arthur replied, his eyes still fixed on the mysterious sleeping princess. After they left, Arthur found himself drawn closer to the capsule. The patterns on its surface seemed to respond to his presence, glowing brighter as he approached. Without thinking, he reached out to touch the crystal surface. To his shock, his hand passed through it as if it were nothing but air. Before he could pull back, his fingers brushed against the princess's lips. Her eyes snapped open, revealing irises the color of starlight. The moment Princess Astria's eyes opened, multiple things happened simultaneously. Her sudden gasp filled the chamber as ancient security protocols activated, sending the facility into immediate lockdown. Crimson emergency lights flooded the room, and heavy metal barriers slid down over the exits with resounding thuds. "By the celestial moons!" she exclaimed, her voice musical despite her panic. She tried to sit up, only to find herself still suspended in the preservation field. Her silver blue hair whirled around her face as she thrashed, her light blue skin taking on an almost luminescent quality under the emergency lighting. Arthur instinctively stepped closer. "Please, Your Highness, try to remain calm. You're safe." She froze at the sound of his voice, her starlight eyes widening as she took in his appearance. You're not like any being I've ever seen. What manner of creature are you?" "I'm human," Arthur replied, keeping his voice steady and reassuring. "My name is Arthur Sterling, and I'm an ambassador from Earth. You've been asleep for over 300 years. The princess's expression shifted from fear to fascination. "Human? Wait, did you say 300 years? Her voice cracked slightly at the revelation. Before Arthur could respond, a computerized voice echoed through the chamber. "Warning, unauthorized awakening protocol detected. Chamber sealed. initiating quarantine procedures. A fine mist began to spray from hidden vents in the ceiling. Arthur's protective suit automatically sealed itself, but the princess remained vulnerable in her suspended state. "Can you move?" he asked urgently. She struggled against the preservation field. "The stasis matrix is still active. I can't." Without hesitation, Arthur reached into the field again, this time wrapping his arm around her waist. The moment he touched her, the field seemed to recognize his presence and deactivated, causing the princess to fall forward into his arms. The contact sent an electric sensation through both of them. Arthur could feel the warmth of her body even through his protective suit, and her scent, something like starlit flowers and cosmic wind, filled his senses. "I apologize for the familiarity, Your Highness," he said, helping her stand steady. She placed a hand on his chest to balance herself, her touch lingering longer than strictly necessary. "Please, call me Astria. After all, you've already broken several royal protocols by touching me." Her tone carried a hint of amusement despite their situation. The mist was getting thicker, and warning lights continued to pulse. Astria's eyes darted around the chamber, her tactical training from centuries ago kicking in. "The security systems are ancient, from before my time. They're designed to contain any threat from the preservation chamber. Any ideas how to override them?" She nodded toward a control panel across the room. "There should be an emergency override, but..." She took a step and stumbled, her legs weak from centuries of disuse. Arthur caught her again, this time scooping her up in his arms. She let out a small gasp of surprise, her arms automatically wrapping around his neck. "Allow me, Your High Astria." "My hero," she murmured, and though her tone was teasing, there was an undercurrent of genuine appreciation. As Arthur carried her toward the control panel, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. They could hear shouts and running footsteps from beyond the sealed doors. "They're probably thinking it's an assassination attempt," Astria said, her breath warm against Arthur's neck. "The last thing anyone expected was for someone to actually wake me." "Why did it work when I touched you?" Arthur asked, carefully setting her down beside the control panel. "Your people tried everything for centuries." Astria's fingers danced across the ancient controls as she spoke. "The poison that was used on me, it was designed to respond only to a specific genetic sequence. My would-be assassins thought they had engineered it to work with only their bloodline's DNA, ensuring I would never wake without their intervention." She paused, giving him a curious look. "Somehow your human genetics must have been similar enough to trigger the reversal. Lucky coincidence?" Her lips curved into a mysterious smile. "I don't believe in coincidences, Ambassador Sterling." The mist was getting dangerously thick now, and Arthur could hear what sounded like cutting tools being applied to the sealed doors. Astria's fingers moved faster across the control panel. Almost there," she exclaimed as the panel lit up with a successful override sequence. The mist began to clear, but before the doors could unlock, the entire chamber shuddered. The cutting sound stopped abruptly, replaced by more shouting and what sounded distinctly like weapons being charged. "Oh no!" Astria whispered, her face paling to an even lighter shade of blue. "They're here." "Who's here?" "The ones who poisoned me. They must have maintained surveillance on this facility all these centuries, waiting for exactly this moment." She turned to Arthur, her eyes intense. "They won't let me leave this chamber alive. Not now that I'm awake and can identify them." Arthur's diplomatic training warred with his instincts to protect. "What do you need me to do?" Astria reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing his beard with curiosity. "You've already done the impossible once today. How do you feel about attempting it again?" Arthur's mind raced as he assessed their situation. The chamber's sealed doors continued to reverberate with the sound of hostile forces gathering outside. He reached for his diplomatic communicator, a sleek device integrated into his protective suit's collar. "Ambassador Sterling to Earth Embassy," he spoke clearly, keeping one arm protectively around Astria. "Priority 1 diplomatic emergency. Earth Embassy receiving," came the immediate response. "Status? Requesting immediate diplomatic intervention. I'm in the Celestial Embassy's preservation wing with..." He glanced at Astria, who nodded encouragingly. "With Princess Astria of the Celestial Throne. We're under threat from armed hostiles." The princess pressed closer to him, her body trembling slightly. Though whether from fear or the lingering effects of her long sleep, he couldn't tell. The warmth of her presence against his side was distracting, but he forced himself to focus. "They won't dare violate Earth's diplomatic protection," she whispered, her breath tickling his ear. "Not without risking interstellar incident." "Confirmed, Ambassador," the Earth Embassy responded. "Diplomatic protection protocols engaged. Security team en route. Maintain position." The sounds outside the chamber changed. They could hear arguing voices, some raised in protest, others in confusion. "Your diplomatic immunity extends to anyone under your protection," Astria explained, her fingers absently tracing patterns on his protective suit's arm. "It's one of the oldest and most respected laws in the galaxy. Even my enemies won't risk breaking it." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "You seem well-versed in diplomatic law for someone who's been asleep for 3 centuries. She gave him a mischievous smile that made his heart skip a beat. "I was quite the scholar before my extended nap. Though I must admit, having a handsome human diplomat come to my rescue wasn't covered in any of my lessons." Before Arthur could respond to her flirtation, the chamber's main door began to open. Counselor Thalos rushed in, followed by a mix of Celestial Embassy security and Earth diplomatic forces. "Ambassador Sterling!" Thalos exclaimed, then froze upon seeing Astria. "By the ancient stars! Princess, you're awake!" "Indeed, Counselor," Astria replied, her voice taking on a formal tone while maintaining physical contact with Arthur. "Though I understand some would prefer I remained otherwise." Thalos' expression darkened. "We detected unauthorized forces attempting to breach the chamber. They retreated when Earth's diplomatic team arrived, but they'll try again," Arthur finished. "Counselor, I'm officially requesting sanctuary for Princess Astria at the Earth Embassy." "That's highly irregular," Thalos protested. "The princess should remain under our protection." "The same protection that failed to prevent her poisoning," Arthur interrupted, his diplomatic training giving way to protective instinct. "Or the protection that just allowed armed hostiles to nearly breach this chamber?" Astria placed a calming hand on his chest, though her touch sent a different kind of heat through him. "Ambassador Sterling is right, Counselor. The Earth Embassy is neutral ground, and clearly..." She looked up at Arthur through her silvery lashes. "Humans have a unique ability to ensure my safety." The double meaning in her words wasn't lost on anyone present. Thalos looked between them, noting their closeness, then sighed. "Very well, but this will cause quite a stir in the council." "Good," Astria said firmly. "It's about time things were stirred up around here." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Earth's diplomatic security team created a protective corridor through the Celestial Embassy, while Arthur and Astria were escorted to a heavily armored diplomatic transport. Inside the vehicle, finally alone for a moment, Astria relaxed against the plush seating. "I never thought my first experience with a human would be so exciting." Arthur tried to maintain his professional demeanor, but her playful tone made it difficult. "Is that what we're calling a near-death experience these days?" "Oh, I've had plenty of those," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "But none of my would-be assassins ever made my heart race quite like you did." The transport hit a small bump, causing Astria to slide closer to him. She made no move to restore the distance between them. "Princess," he began. "Astria," she corrected softly. "Astria," he amended. "While I'm flattered, you should know that human-alien relationships are complicated," she finished, amusement dancing in her starlight eyes. "Everything worth having is complicated, Arthur. Besides, you've already broken several royal protocols. What's a few more between friends?" Before he could respond, his communicator chimed. "Ambassador, we're approaching the Earth Embassy. Security scans detect no pursuit, but we're picking up increased chatter on diplomatic channels." "Acknowledged," Arthur replied, then turned to Astria. "We'll need to make a formal statement soon. Your awakening will have massive political implications." She nodded, suddenly serious. "The houses will be in chaos. 3 centuries of political maneuvering, undone by a single human's touch." Her expression softened as she looked at him. "Though I can't say I regret it." The transport glided to a stop inside the Earth Embassy's secure hangar. As they prepared to disembark, Astria caught Arthur's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for waking me, but for everything after. I know this complicates your diplomatic mission considerably." Arthur squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes the most important diplomatic missions aren't the ones we plan for." The Earth Embassy's secure wing hummed with activity as various alien delegations attempted to gain audience with Princess Astria. A week had passed since her awakening, and the political landscape was shifting dramatically with each passing day. Arthur stood at the window of his private office, watching the swirling lights of diplomatic vessels circling the embassy like hungry predators. Behind him, holographic displays showed the mounting requests for meetings, each more urgent than the last. "Quite the circus you've started, Ambassador." Astria's melodious voice came from his doorway. She had traded her preservation suit for an elegant diplomatic gown in shimmering silver, though its cut maintained the form-fitting style she seemed to prefer. "I believe you're the main attraction, Your Highness," he replied, turning to face her. The sight of her still took his breath away. Her light blue skin seemed to glow in the embassy's soft lighting, and her silver blue hair cascaded freely down her back. She glided into the room, closing the door behind her. "I've told you to call me Astria," she reminded him, moving closer, "especially when we're alone." The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Over the past week, their interactions had grown increasingly charged, each casual touch and lingering glance building towards something neither could deny. "The noble houses are in an uproar," Arthur said, trying to maintain professional distance, each claiming they have the strongest claim to protect you. "Protect me?" Astria laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. "They want to control me, or eliminate me, perhaps both." She stepped closer until they were mere inches apart. "But they can't touch me here, can they? Not while I'm under your, protection." Arthur swallowed hard. "Astria, do you know what I've learned about humans this past week?" she interrupted, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "You're fascinating creatures, so young compared to my people, yet so vital, so alive." "We have our moment," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. "You certainly do." Her fingers trailed down to his chest. "My people live for millennia, but sometimes I think we forget how to truly live. We get lost in our politics, our traditions, our endless games of power." A distant explosion lit up the night sky, and another attempt by someone to breach the embassy's defensive shields. Neither of them flinched. "The shields will hold," Arthur assured her. "I know," she whispered. "I feel safe here. With you." Her starlight eyes met his. "Do you know how long it's been since I felt truly safe?" The answer hung between them, 300 years. "Arthur," she continued, her voice soft but intense, "when you touched me in that chamber, you didn't just wake me from stasis. You woke something inside me I thought had died centuries ago." He could feel his diplomatic restraint crumbling. This could complicate things. "Everything worth having is complicated," she reminded him of her earlier words. "And right now, I don't want to think about politics or plots or noble houses. I want to feel alive again." Their lips met in a kiss that felt like starfire. All the tension and attraction that had been building exploded in a moment of pure connection. Her skin was impossibly soft under his hands, her alien biology creating sensations he'd never experienced before. What followed was a passionate exploration of their differences and similarities, a joining that transcended species and politics. Their encounter was both tender and intense, a celebration of life and awakening that left them both transformed. Later, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, another explosion lit the sky outside. "They're getting more desperate," Arthur observed, running his fingers through her silvery hair. Astria traced patterns on his chest, her touch sending pleasant shivers through him. "They should be. Everything's changed now." "Because you're awake?" She propped herself up on an elbow, looking at him with those mesmerizing eyes. "Because I'm awake, yes, but also because of you, because of us." "What do you mean?" "My people have always seen humans as fascinating but primitive, too young to be taken seriously in galactic politics." She smiled. "But you woke me when none of my people could. And now?" She placed his hand on her abdomen, and his eyes widened as he felt a subtle warmth there, a kind of energy he hadn't noticed before. "Already?" he breathed. "My people are very fertile when we choose to be," she explained. "And after 3 centuries of sleep, my body was more than ready for new life." Her expression grew serious. "This changes everything, Arthur. A child of both our peoples. The noble houses won't know whether to celebrate or panic." The news broke like a supernova across galactic media networks. Sleeping princess awakened by human touch. Now carries hybrid heir. The headline screamed across holographic displays throughout known space, causing unprecedented chaos in diplomatic circles. Arthur stood in the Earth Embassy's main conference room, facing a wall of holographic projections showing various Earth government officials. His protective suit had been replaced with formal diplomatic attire, though he still carried himself with the same quiet strength that had first drawn Astria to him. "This is an unprecedented opportunity," Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Relations declared. "The first human celestial hybrid child, and not just any child, the heir to one of the most powerful thrones in the galaxy." "With all due respect, Madam Secretary," Arthur interjected, "we're talking about my child, not just a diplomatic opportunity. Your child," another official emphasized, "who could reshape the balance of power in this sector. The Celestials have always viewed humanity as barely more than clever primitives. This changes everything." Before Arthur could respond, the conference room's door opened and Astria glided in. She wore a gown that elegantly displayed her growing bump, its iridescent fabric shifting colors with each movement. The Earth officials fell silent, many seeing her in person for the first time. "Gentlemen, ladies," she addressed them with regal grace, moving to stand beside Arthur. "I believe you're discussing my child's future?" The secretary recovered first. "Your Highness, we were just planning how best to use my unborn child as a political tool." In Astria's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. "How very human of you. And yet, it's precisely that human unpredictability that drew me to Arthur." She placed her hand in his and he squeezed it gently. The gesture wasn't lost on the officials watching. "The noble houses are in chaos," she continued. "Half of them are calling for my head, claiming I've sullied the royal bloodline. The other half are scrambling to ally themselves with Earth, seeing which way the solar winds are blowing." "And which way is that, Your Highness?" the secretary asked carefully. Astria's free hand rested on her abdomen. "Toward the future. My people have stagnated, lost in our own immortality. We needed something to wake us up." She smiled at Arthur. How fitting that it took a human's touch to do exactly that. A series of urgent alerts suddenly flashed across the room's displays. Outside, the embassy's shields flared as they repelled another attack, this one stronger than previous attempts. "The seventh house," Astria identified immediately. "Always the most traditional. They're probably beside themselves about the pregnancy." Arthur moved protectively closer to her, but she merely laughed. "Don't worry, my love. They can't harm us here." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, I rather enjoy watching them waste their energy on those shields." The secretary cleared her throat. "About that, Your Highness, Earth is prepared to offer you full citizenship and protection, but we'd like to move you to a more secure location. Perhaps back to Earth itself?" "Absolutely not," Arthur and Astria said simultaneously, then shared an amused look. "Running would show weakness," Astria explained. "We need to face this head-on. The child I carry represents something new. A bridge between our peoples, yes, but more importantly, a symbol of change." She turned to face Arthur fully, her starlight eyes intense. "My people fear change because we've had so little of it for so long. But humans embrace it. They thrive on it. It's what makes them so remarkable." Their gazes locked and the rest of the room seemed to fade away. The attraction between them was palpable, a force as real as the shield impacts outside. Without caring about their audience, Astria pulled Arthur into a passionate kiss. When they parted, she whispered against his lips, "And it's what makes you so irresistible." The secretary coughed politely. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion later." "An excellent suggestion," Astria agreed, not taking her eyes off Arthur. "I believe the ambassador and I have some private diplomatic matters to discuss." After the officials signed off, Arthur and Astria barely made it back to their private quarters before passion overtook them again. Their lovemaking was intense and primal, a celebration of life and defiance against those who would keep them apart. The medical bay of the Earth Embassy pulsed with a mix of human and celestial technology. Astria lay on an examination bed, her growing belly emanating a subtle glow that had both medical teams fascinated. Arthur stood beside her, their fingers intertwined as holographic displays showed their developing child. "Extraordinary," Dr. Amanda Pearson murmured, studying the readings. The fetus is developing characteristics of both species, but in ways we've never seen before? The celestial healer, Master Physician Nixus, nodded in agreement. The child appears to be taking the best traits from both genetic lines. Your human adaptability, Ambassador, combined with our longevity and natural energy manipulation abilities. Astria squeezed Arthur's hand as another wave of energy rippled through her. Is this normal? These pulses? For a pure celestial pregnancy, no, Nixus admitted. But then, nothing about this is normal. You're creating something entirely new. Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the embassy. The medical bay's windows polarized automatically as weapons fire lit up the night sky. Earth Defense Fleet engaging hostile vessels, announced the embassy's AI. Multiple 7th House warships detected. Arthur's communicator chirped urgently. Ambassador, we have a situation, his security chief reported. The attacks have escalated, but there's something else. A large group of young Celestials has gathered outside the embassy, forming a protective barrier between our shields and the attacking ships. What? Astria sat up, wincing slightly, as another energy pulse moved through her. Putting it on screen, the chief responded. The medical bay's main display showed hundreds of young Celestials, their ships forming a defensive ring around the embassy. Many bore the insignias of various noble houses, but they'd arranged themselves in a new formation, one that symbolized unity rather than house allegiance. This is Lady Lima of the 3rd House, a new voice broadcast across all frequencies. Speaking for the Progressive Alliance, we stand with Princess Astria and her human consort. The time of rigid traditions and stagnant thinking is over. Astria's eyes filled with tears of joy. Lima, she was just a child when I went into stasis. Her grandmother was one of my closest friends. More young Celestials joined the defensive formation, their ships creating a dazzling display of solidarity. The 7th House attackers, faced with firing on their own young nobility, began to retreat. Your Highness, Lima continued, we've watched humanity's rise with fascination. While the old guard fears their adaptability and passion, we see it as the key to our future. Your union with Ambassador Sterling and the child you carry represents everything we've hoped for. Arthur helped Astria stand, supporting her as another energy pulse rippled through her body. Dr. Pearson rushed forward with scanning equipment. These energy pulses are getting stronger, she reported. The baby seems to be responding to the heightened emotions and energy outside. Of course it is, Astria laughed, placing Arthur's hand on her belly. It's a child of both worlds, drawing strength from conflict just like its human father, while channeling energy like its celestial mother. The touch of Arthur's hand seemed to calm both mother and child, the energy pulses settling into a steady, warm glow. Their eyes met, and the love between them was palpable. You know what this means, she whispered, pulling him closer. Our child won't just bridge our peoples. It will lead them. The old powers can't stop what's coming. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, and the energy surrounding them flared brilliantly, causing both medical teams to step back in amazement. Fascinating, Nixus breathed. The child's energy responds to their connection. It's as if the very act that created it continues to strengthen it. Dr. Pearson's instruments were going wild. The genetic integration is accelerating. Whatever's happening between them is affecting the baby's development, stabilizing the hybrid traits. Arthur and Astria barely heard them, lost in their own world of touch and sensation. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Astria started. Private quarters, Arthur finished, scooping her up in his arms. Now. The medical teams didn't try to stop them, having learned that their intimate moments seemed to benefit both mother and child in ways their instruments could barely measure. Later, tangled in sheets in each other, they watched through their quarters' windows as more young Celestials arrived, their ships creating patterns of light and energy in support of the unprecedented union they represented. They're beautiful, Astria murmured, tracing patterns on Arthur's chest. All of them, choosing hope over fear, change over stagnation. Just like you did, he replied, kissing her temple. She laughed softly. All I did was fall in love with the impossible human who woke me with a kiss. Everything else. She gestured to the lights outside, to her glowing belly, to the future they were creating. This is just the universe catching up to what we already knew. The Grand Council chamber of the Earth Embassy had been transformed into a neutral ground for the most significant diplomatic summit in recent galactic history. Representatives from all 12 noble houses sat in their traditional positions, while Earth's delegation occupied newly installed seats of equal prominence. Astria, now visibly pregnant and glowing with an intense inner light, sat at the center with Arthur beside her. Her form-fitting ceremonial gown highlighted her condition while maintaining regal dignity. The energy pulses from their child had become more frequent, creating subtle auroras that danced around her. "The houses cannot ignore the will of our youth," declared Lord Helios of the First House. "When even our own children stand against tradition, perhaps it's time to reconsider what tradition means." "Blasphemy!" spat Lady Mara of the Seventh House. "3 millennia of pure bloodlines, and you would throw it all away for—" She was interrupted by a brilliant flash of light emanating from Astria. The princess gasped, clutching Arthur's hand as waves of energy rippled through her body. "The child," she whispered, her starlight eyes wide. "It's time." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Arthur scooped Astria into his arms, her body practically weightless despite her condition, as both human and celestial medical teams rushed forward. "But it's too early," someone protested. Master Physician Nixus pushed through the crowd. "Time flows differently for this child. The hybrid vigor has accelerated everything." They rushed Astria to the medical bay, the entire diplomatic summit following in their wake. The energy pulses were coming faster now, each one more intense than the last. "The baby's energy signature is off the chart," Dr. Pearson reported, her instruments struggling to keep up. "It's like nothing we've ever seen." Astria pulled Arthur close, her skin almost translucent with the light pulsing beneath it. "Kiss me," she demanded, "like you did when you first woke me." Understanding flickered in his eyes, just as his touch had awakened her from centuries of sleep. Perhaps it could help guide their child into the world. Their lips met in a passionate embrace, and the energy in the room surged. The medical teams stepped back in awe as the light surrounding Astria and Arthur grew to encompass them completely. Within that cocoon of energy, something miraculous was happening. "The genetic integration is perfect," Nixus breathed, as studying his readings. "The child is combining traits that should be impossible to merge." Through it all, Arthur and Astria remained connected, their bond providing an anchor for the incredible energies swirling around them. Their passion for each other seemed to guide and stabilize the process, turning what could have been a dangerous birth into something beautiful and controlled. With a final pulse of light that temporarily blinded everyone in the room, their son was born. The baby boy had skin that shifted between human tones and his mother's celestial blue, while his eyes held both Arthur's piercing blue and Astria's starlight quality. His hair was a striking mix of his father's brown and his mother's silver blue, creating an effect like a nebula. "He's perfect," Astria whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face as she held their child. Arthur kissed her forehead and then their son's, watching in amazement as the baby's skin responded to his touch with ripples of light. The assembled diplomats and nobles pressed forward to see, all previous arguments forgotten in the face of this miracle. "The first of his kind," Lady Lima announced, her young voice carrying over the crowd, "living proof that change isn't just possible, it's beautiful." Even Lady Mara of the Seventh House seemed moved. "He has the ancient markings," she admitted reluctantly, pointing to birthmarks on the child's skin that resembled traditional celestial royal symbols. "The bloodline recognizes him." "Of course it does," Astria said proudly. "He represents the best of both worlds. The wisdom and power of the Celestials, combined with humanity's passion and adaptability." The baby opened his eyes fully, and the room gasped as he projected a miniature galaxy of light around himself, playing with energies that most Celestials took centuries to master. "What shall we call him?" Arthur asked softly. Astria smiled. "In the ancient tongue of my people, there is a word, Novaris. It means new star, because that's what he is. A new light in the darkness, showing us all a better way forward." 5 years passed like stardust through an hourglass. The grand palace of the celestial throne, once a monument to tradition and stagnation, had been transformed. Its ancient halls now hummed with the energy of change, much like the young prince who raced through them, leaving trails of starlight in his wake. "Novaris!" Astria's melodious laugh echoed through the corridor as she chased after their son. "You can't keep using energy manipulation to escape your diplomatic lessons." The 5-year-old prince, his skin shifting between human and celestial hues, poked his head around a corner. His nebula-like hair swirled with amusement. "But father says the best diplomacy happens outside the classroom." "Oh, he does he?" Astria's eyes sparkled as she felt Arthur's presence behind her. "Betrayed by my own son," Arthur chuckled, wrapping his arms around his wife. Time had only enhanced his rugged charm, and the past 5 years of adapting to celestial culture had given him an aura of power that matched his diplomatic role. Astria melted into his embrace, their passion for each other undiminished by time. If anything, their bond had grown stronger, their intimate moments still creating pulses of energy that the palace's censors had learned to politely ignore. "The Council of Houses is assembling," Arthur murmured against her ear. "Today's the day." Novarius emerged fully from his hiding place, suddenly serious beyond his years. "Is it time for the recognition ceremony, father?" "It is, young prince," came Lady Lima's voice as she approached, now the leader of the progressive alliance that had transformed celestial society. "The houses will formally recognize the new bloodline, your bloodline." The ceremony itself was held in the ancient Hall of Stars, where the ceiling reflected the real-time movements of every celestial body in their galaxy. Representatives from all 12 noble houses were present, along with a large Earth delegation. Novarius stood between his parents, his small form radiating confidence. Unlike pure celestial children, who took centuries to grow and develop, his hybrid nature had accelerated his growth while preserving the best traits of both species. Lord Helios stepped forward, his ceremonial robes catching the starlight. 5 years ago, many thought the mixing of human and celestial blood would weaken us. Today, we gather to acknowledge how wrong we were. He gestured to Novarius, who was casually creating complex energy patterns that most adult celestials couldn't manage. In Prince Novarius, we see not dilution, but enhancement. Human adaptability and passion, combined with celestial power and wisdom, a perfect fusion that points the way to our future. Even Lady Mara, once their strongest opponent, nodded in agreement. The bloodline has not just survived, it has evolved, as must we all. Arthur squeezed Astria's hand as they watched their son step forward to receive the formal recognition of the houses. Their touch still sparked with the same electricity that had first awakened her, a reminder of how their impossible love had changed everything. "I never thought," Astria whispered to him, "when I was poisoned and fell into that endless sleep, that my awakening would lead to this, that a human's touch would not just wake me, but wake our entire civilization to new possibilities." Arthur pulled her closer, not caring about the formal setting. "I was supposed to be on a routine diplomatic mission. Instead, I found a sleeping princess and fell in love with her." "And made me fall in love with you," she added, her eyes full of promise for their private celebration later. Their intimate moment was interrupted by gas from the assembly, as Novarius, instead of simply accepting the house's recognition, created a spectacular display of energy that formed a bridge between the human and celestial delegations, a physical manifestation of the bridges he represented. "My son," he declared in a clear voice that carried his father's strength and his mother's melody, "will be to build more bridges between humans and celestials, between tradition and progress, between what we were and what we can become." The hall erupted in applause and cheers. The same young celestials who had once defended the Earth Embassy now held positions of power throughout their society, and their human counterparts had proven equally adaptable to working with their ancient allies. Later that night, after Novarius was asleep, his energy finally exhausted, Arthur and Astria stood on their private balcony, watching the dance of stars that their son loved to mimic. "Do you ever regret it?" Arthur asked softly. "Choosing a relatively short-lived human as your mate?" Astria turned in his arms, her beauty unchanged by the years. "My love, you didn't just wake me from stasis. You woke me to life itself. Every moment with you is worth a century of sleep." Their lips met in a passionate kiss that sent ripples of energy across the palace grounds, a phenomenon that had become known as the Lover's Aurora and was considered a good omen by their people. "Besides," she whispered against his lips, "who says we can't find a way to extend your life? After all, our son proves that anything is possible when humanity's determination meets celestial power." Arthur smiled, lifting her into his arms. Speaking of proving things possible, their laughter echoed through their chambers as they celebrated their love, their legacy, and the future they had created. All because a human male had dared to wake a sleeping alien princess with a touch.